Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining the call to discuss the scope and schedule for the new market enhancements for summer 2021 Readiness Initiative. This is Christina Osborne with ISO Stakeholder Affairs. I will be facilitating the meeting. If you are logged into the web conference, to the right of your screen, under the panelist section, you'll see the list of ISO representatives who are also on the call. We do have James Friedrich, who is the policy lead who's assigned to this initiative. He's actually going to be presenting the scope and the schedule. The presentation that we're going to run through today is actually out on the initiative webpage. It was posted on Monday. We are also recording the meeting. We will make that file available to all of you as soon as we receive it from AT&T. It'll be on the initiative webpage as well. So what the plan is to go ahead and present the scope first. We'll stop for questions, and then we'll present the schedule and take questions again. So if you could just hold off on your questions until that time, and also at that time we'll instruct you on how to enter the queue. Just as a reminder, if you could please state your name and affiliation prior to asking your question, that would be helpful to all participants. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to James Friedrich.
Thanks, Christina. So let's dive in. We've signaled this since our mid-December board meeting, but we are planning changes in response to the summer 2020 events, and we'll be reprioritizing our near-term stakeholder efforts so that we can get as many enhancements and things in place by this summer. And so to do that, we need to be able to focus our near-term efforts on these market rules and procedural changes to be ready to manage any heat events in this upcoming summer. And that will require us to reschedule our existing and planned market design stakeholder initiatives and put them off for a few months as we focus our efforts on this initiative. And not only are we focusing our efforts internally on this initiative, but we're really hoping that the broader stakeholder community can be engaged and focused on this as well. And we're going to, have a very expedited process, and we need stakeholders to be as engaged as possible if we're going to make some valuable changes for this summer. I will go over the schedule at the end, but just, as an overview, we're hoping to get these changes implemented by June 1st of this year. Doing that will require us to file tariff amendments with FERC in April. And then walking back from there means that we're targeting the March EIM governing body and March ISO Board of Governors meetings to present our policy changes. And so we really only have a few weeks to get as much done as possible. So I do want to stress that, we don't have a lot of time to make these changes, and this process will be expedited, but hopefully we can be as engaged as possible so we can get as many valuable changes as we can completed by this summer. Next slide, please. So the purpose of this slide is, I think it's really important to let stakeholders know sort of what this initiative is and what this initiative isn't. So in this initiative, we will be tackling only a subset of items identified in the preliminary root cause analysis, and in fact are also going to be presenting some additional items that weren't necessarily reflected in there but had been brought to our attention either internally or through stakeholder comments about things that we might want to consider. So I do want to outline a couple of, concurrent efforts that are going on with the ISO. We are supporting and coordinating with the CPUC and CEC on various action items identified in the root cause analysis, and many of those items are being addressed with the appropriate forum being, perhaps CPUC proceedings or CEC IPER proceedings. And so, again, we're providing this list of other activities because we want to make sure that stakeholders are focused on, in this initiative, the things that we're trying to take up and make sure that people don't feel like this is sort of a catch-all initiative for all of our activities, and remind people we're only looking at a subset here. We also want to remind folks that some of the summer readiness action items are going to be taken up in existing stakeholder initiatives. For example, one example is the planned outage requirement is taking place in the resource adequacy enhancements. We also want to be clear that, while, data may be important to justify some of the changes that we propose through this initiative, this is not the appropriate venue for general summer 2020 data requests. We have a process there outlined to follow if there are such requests. And also that, this is not intended to replace, obviously, many of our mid and long-term efforts through other stakeholder processes like those in our upcoming scarcity pricing initiative and day-ahead market enhancements initiatives. Also have important features, that may help for summer readiness, but just the timeline of those are just not feasible to tackle and make changes by this summer. And so, of course, there are longer-term efforts that we're still considering that will be valuable in the near future. Next slide, please. So this is going to be a pretty wide-ranging stakeholder initiative touching on a lot of different topics. There are 6 here that we've identified already. The first is, and I'll go through in this presentation a little bit of the scope of what we're considering for each topic, of course. The first is related to export and load priorities and sort of expands upon some of the additional work that, we started with a workshop in November to outline our scheduling priorities and penalty prices. And so some of this effort sort of expands on those things and addresses, any additional rough items that we're looking at. The second is looking at reliability demand response, resource dispatch, and its related price impacts. The third is requirements for storage during tight system conditions. Fourth are cost recovery provisions for hourly block imports during tight system conditions. Fifth is short-term scarcity price enhancements that we think we could feasibly make by June 1st. Sixth relates to EIM coordination during emergencies and reviewing the resource sufficiency test. And of course, there, number 7, we are open to other items identified by stakeholders, but we do urge stakeholders to keep in mind that given the tight implementation timeline, to keep that in mind when making suggestions. Next slide, please. So I wanted to walk through some general themes of not necessarily policy proposals, but sort of what we have in mind for the scope of some of these items. The biggest thing is that we're trying to implement measures to ensure supply availability during tight system conditions and or provide the right bidding incentives during tight system conditions. So this could be through indirectly through market incentives or directly through changes to procedures or business practices or systems. And so that's sort of the general theme that undercurrents all of these changes. You'll see that many, but not all, of these topics that we present are have the condition of a tight system condition. And we expect that some of these topics will lead to policy changes that are triggered based on some sort of predefined tight supply condition and not necessarily to be, blanket rules that are applicable during all intervals. So that's something that we would like people to keep in mind. And what one of the tasks that we'll be working to do is try to define what the appropriate, trigger will be to implement or to, have some of these rule changes take effect. And here's a list of 3 that we've started to talk about, the triggers could be some sort of quantity-based trigger where you trigger it based on, some sort of RUC availability or infeasibility, or some sort of pre-established operator alert or warning. And those two could be one and the same in some instances. It could also, maybe be some sort of price trigger based on, say, day-ahead market system marginal energy cost or something similar to trigger some of these. And I think, to the extent possible, it'd be nice to try to have some harmony in those triggered events for simplicity, but it may be the case that some of the rule changes that we're considering don't necessarily have the same triggers as others, and so just something to keep in mind. Next slide. Okay, so I will walk through now the, sort of a 50,000-foot view level of the scope of each topic that we're considering, and of course, these are items that we're discussing internally, and we will have, sort of a straw proposal ready in a couple of weeks, but we just wanted to give stakeholder a heads up about what we're working on. For the first topic related to export and load priorities, like I said, this is sort of an extension of the workshop that we did in November. And, primarily what we're looking to do is to clarify or modify the scheduling priorities of our internal load and our exports, both supported by contracted supply or unsupported by contracted supply. And we are holding an informational workshop on the 12th, I think that's next Tuesday, in which we are inviting it'll be informational for the broader stakeholder community, but sort of what we plan to do at that workshop next week is to start with having the ISO present and sort of recap that penalty parameter and scheduling priority information and how the ISO manages its priorities for load and exports, both from a market perspective and also from an operator's perspective. And then inviting some external BAAs and other market participants to provide their perspectives. And from those external BAAs, it'll be important to hear how they're managing their export and load priorities, and so that we can sort of level set ourselves against those and try to provide comparable scheduling priorities with our neighbors. Next slide, please. So the second topic related to reliability, demand response, resource dispatch. What we're looking to do is to review, RDR dispatch, how it's dispatched, and try to evaluate and develop enhancements to try to get RDR dispatches to create appropriate price signals. And so we will be looking at that. Next slide, please. For our third topic, we're looking at potential requirements specifically for storage resources during tight system conditions, and the scope of this topic is rather broad. We're generally looking to, for ways to ensure that storage is available to meet both local and system needs. We're also exploring additional changes that may not need tariff changes, such as updating the AGC signal to preserve state of charge. Next slide, please. The fourth topic relates to cost recovery for hourly block resources during tight system conditions. Hourly block resources are, or economic hourly block resources are scheduled in HASP, and if the FMM price ends up lower than the HASP advisory price, some of those resources may not recover their costs. and there's no uplift process for those types of resources. And so, we've explored the merits or dismerits of doing that in previous stakeholder initiatives, and there are pros and cons of enabling hourly block resources to recover their costs, and what we're trying to identify is if there are certain market conditions like tight supply conditions where the pros of providing that cost recovery does make sense, or the pros outweigh the cons in those cases, and so that's something that we will be looking into. Next slide, please. The next topic relates to short-term scarcity price enhancements. This is a topic where the primary goal is to provide better market incentives for more accurate day-ahead scheduling during tight supply conditions, especially for load and virtual supply. We, caveat that we're only really able to focus on simple mechanisms in order for it to be implementable in June, and know that, stakeholders are keen on scarcity price enhancements, and we believe that, since those enhancements are, likely to be too complicated to tackle on this expedited of a timeline, that we will address with stakeholders those more comprehensive scarcity price changes once we launch our scarcity pricing initiative later in the year. Next slide, please. So the last topic that has already been identified relates to EIM coordination and reviewing the resource sufficiency test. So this will start with another informational workshop on January 13th, and that's next Wednesday, in which we'll cover how the resource efficiency test is performed today for the ISO BA and for the EIM. And we'll also review how the resource efficiency test performed during a sample of heat events, or heat event days. We'll also, as part of this, be looking at ways we can coordinate better with EIM entities during emergency conditions. And one of the things we'll be looking into is to explore, whether, if there's any changes that we may need to make to the resource efficiency test specifically in tight supply conditions, without undermining its intent to prevent leaning. Last slide, please. And of course, this is our, open topic slide to suggest it, or, make clear to stakeholders that we are open to other suggestions about what we should be considering in this initiative, with, again, to keep in mind it must be implementable by June 1st. We will take stakeholder feedback on that. We also wanted to, remind stakeholders that we are pending a final decision on system market power mitigation, and so depending on how that goes, some of the system market power mitigation measures may be, part of this process. I think that was the last slide. Yep. Before the schedule. So I went through quite a few slides.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was just going to say I went through quite a bit of material, and we're ready to open it up for questions and comments.
Yeah, so if you have a question, you can enter the queue by pressing #2. I do see a chat question as well on topic 2. So while we're waiting for folks to enter the queue, the question is, if you go back to that slide real quick, we'll address this question. So it said, I realize this is a scoping meeting, but could you provide background and clarify what you mean by the suggestion that CAISO plans to evaluate and develop enhancements to ensure RDRR dispatches create appropriate price signals? So James, you want to answer that, or anyone else from ISO?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I can give it a. Oh, go ahead, Brad.
Oh, go ahead, James. This was Brad. I just missed the question, but James, take a shot at it.
Yeah, I think I think part of what we're looking at is how, when operators are, manually dispatching RDR into the market, those prices don't get reflected in the market prices, and that creates some issues. And so I think that's, at a high level what the background is. But Brad, if there's anything additional you want to add.
No, James, that sums it up pretty good.
Okay. We do have another chat question. Do we have anybody in the queue so far, Kay?
We do have 5 questions in the queue.
Okay. So let me read off the chat question, and then we'll go to the question queue. So the question was, will the CISO explore implementing a trigger that would automatically suspend convergence bidding based on system conditions?
Yeah, this is Brad Cooper. I could take that. No, that's not within our proposed scope. We suspended convergence bidding through some conditions that we addressed and that we're trying to address through other aspects of this initiative. I think that the scarcity pricing enhancements potentially addresses some of the adverse incentives that were the cause for convergence bids that caused us problems, as well as some of the other demand scheduling behavior, and then it's also somewhat related to the first topic, the load and export priority topic. So I guess I'm not saying the ISO wouldn't entertain suspending convergence bidding again, but it's not something that we think we need to develop an automated trigger for, and hopefully don't need to do that again.
All right, thank you, Brad. So Kay, let's go ahead and take questions on the phone.
All right. Caller, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Kathleen Colbert from Vista Corporation. Can you hear me?
Hi, Kathleen.
Yes.
Oh, hi, great. Thank you. I have a few comments. You did go over quite a bit, so apologies, but I'll try and go through it kind of sequentially. My first comment is a high-level comment. It's a suggestion for, I suppose you could consider it a suggestion for scope, but it's more a suggestion for how to approach the scope. So I'm having a bit of a deja vu to an old stakeholder project, Aliso Canyon's gas electric coordination. It had a similar timeline. You have a little bit longer. Jealous about that. But slightly different timeline, but very similar. Started roughly Q1 of the same year for implementation in the summer to address emergency conditions. And while I don't recall if it was during the policy development or if it was when the tariff was being developed, CAISO management decided to take the approach of, for the initial summer, making the operational or market tools that were adopted to address that concern temporary. And then in a later iteration, identified which elements would be extended, retired, or made permanent. To me, this seems very reminiscent to that, and I thought that worked fairly well. It also, and another benefit just to highlight, and I know there's multiple people on the call who are familiar with the process and can provide more context, but another benefit was we were able to evaluate the items being implemented on a very expedited basis, knowing that they were really addressing that immediate emergency condition, and that it would allow further vetting to ensure that they were good long-term solutions. So I plan to put those in my written comments, but I did want to raise it on the call and let you know in advance that that's a suggestion and kind of the ask. And in that context, I would say I'm not necessarily asking that the scope mandate that everything be temporary, but it would be, I think it would be beneficial if, as you identify the solutions, narrow down on them in the next month or so to flag which of them are more appropriate as temporary versus permanent, Some of these may be more benign, and that could be fine to be permanent. But I think having that discussion and the ability for stakeholders to provide that kind of feedback through the process would be really beneficial.
Great. Thanks, Kathleen.
Before I drop off, I did want to make a couple other comments that were specific. If we could move to slide 4. A second ask for scope that I'd like to make, and we'll put in written comments, and I made it this morning at the RA enhancements, is that while I appreciate what you're saying, that it is the planned outage requirement, the 100% planned substitution requirement element is being discussed in, or has been being vetted in the RA enhancements project. Even in this morning, the way it was described as phase 1 for summer 2021 only, phase 2 for the longer term, it's pretty intuitive to me that the short term, as it was described, solution for the 100% planned substitution requirement for summer 2021 is more appropriate in this project, at least in my opinion, because then we can focus on addressing the reliability needs for summer 2021 and talk about it. Should it be temporary until additional measures are put in place, or should it be permanent, and have a chance to really vet that only in light of our immediate reliability concerns, and allow for the longer-term discussions to remain in the RA enhancements. So that is one ask I'll be making in both of these projects, so I will put those in my written comments, but wanted to raise that on the call as well. My third ask is for slide 8. So this is really interesting, and I really appreciate all the historical knowledge that John Gooden has on reliability demand response resources. Like Kaisa, you have a fantastic DR team, and so I'm pretty confident that this will be an interesting scope item. But one of my asks is really that some of the history associated with RDRR is really complicated, especially in like one element being that the RDRR has to be priced between 95 to 100% of the bid cap according to a settlement that were agreed on. And I'd like to ask for the next iteration, whichever workshop this covers, if you could provide education that really goes into the specific rules that define how RDRR is being used and treated, which is codified in the tariff, but it really is kind of feeds out of those settlement processes that the CPUC and other parties engaged with. And I know you have those that history and knowledge internally, and you could just walk stakeholders through that during the workshops. That would be really helpful for us to better evaluate any proposals.
Great. Thanks for your feedback, Kathleen. How many callers do we have in the queue, operator? Yeah, thank you.
We have
6. Okay, we'll go on to the next question, please.
All right. Caller, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Paul Nelson on behalf of CLICA. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Hi, Paul.
Okay. Thank you. So perfect. We're on the slide that I had a question on. So my question is this, are you only going to look at reliability demand response resources, or are you going to look at non-reliability demand response resources? And reading the Department of Market Monitoring report, it was interesting. It seems like there were at times non-RDR resources that was not dispatched when all of the reliability was dispatched. So are you going to think about expanding the scope on this to all the all demand response programs as opposed to just limiting it to reliability programs?
So this is Danny. I think right now our intent would be to limit this to the RDRR resources. Really, this will detail some of the mechanics of how this is dispatched. It tends to be dispatched manually more often than not. And so we'd be trying to drill down and try to eliminate the need to manually dispatch it from time to time and let it be dispatched to the market.
And I think
this
an
is Brad.
Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, this is Brad. I think we'll circle back and double check and make sure the same issues didn't occur for PDR resources as RDRR. It's at least our understanding that the predominant issue was through RDRR. We're aware that there's issues in pricing, and I don't recall if this occurred or not through last summer, but when the utilities dispatch demand response that's not in our market, or we call them and ask them to dispatch it to relieve the demand, and then that affects the price. That is a complicated issue and not something we're anticipating including in this scope, because it wouldn't be feasible to be able to address that by the short time we have. So we're focusing on the more limited changes like Danny said, to see if there's a better way we can avoid our manual dispatch of RDRR resources so they're not setting the price.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in their cases where you manually dispatched the reliability programs, but then the PDR was not dispatched either by price or manually. I think that's particularly interesting, because are you leaving a resource, an unutilized resource that could have avoided stage 2?
Yeah, right. But the manual dispatch of other programs out of our market, we've done some research into that, and it's I'm blanking on them. Midwest ISO, I believe, is one, and then one other ISO has ways to account for that, but it's extremely complicated. It's stakeholder processes that took years to work out, and so that's not something we're going to address in 2 months, and so we weren't planning on including that in the scope.
Okay.
Right. Moving on to the next caller, please go ahead.
Hey, this is Michelle Quito from the Energy Division. I just wanted to mention a couple of things and ask a couple of questions. So with regard to scope, I would just note that one issue might be that the rain penalties are only 1/2 of the CPM. That was an issue raised by PG&E in the initial rain filing. The other issue that I'd note is that the availability assessment hours for rain penalties are only weekdays, and that one of the 2 heating events was both Saturday, September 5th, and Saturday, August 15th. So it does seem like weekends are really critical as well, and so that might be another area to explore. And then finally, in terms of scope, we've mentioned previously that we think it would be really helpful to have the export and import data, not just net imports at the ties. We would note that you have that information for the EIM, the EIM transfers. You just don't have it for the imports and exports. And given the critical importance of imports and exports, it seems like that would be a low-hanging fruit for the summer. In terms of questions, I'm just wondering if you're going to discuss all these initiatives at the workshops, or just the 2 that you called out, the load and the EIM, or the resource efficiency.
This is James, and the workshops will be specific to those topics. So load and export priorities on next Tuesday, and then resource efficiency next Wednesday. And as of now, we don't have planned workshops for the other topics.
Okay, so if I was trying to guess what you might come out with, is there anywhere I could go to figure that out, like the other issues? So you're not discussing the other issues then? I guess that's what I'm hearing. You're not going to be discussing RDRR, HASP, or the other issues then?
Yeah, Michelle, this is Brad. We have some broad ideas of what we're going to come out with, but we don't have proposals yet. We're moving quickly. We're doing this in real time. We're meeting every day, researching, working on our teams and developing our proposals. We're not going to be prepared to tell you what we're going to come out with. We'll come up with something, which will be, week after next, where we present our straw proposal, or the week after that. James will go over the schedule in a minute. Okay. But as far as RDRR, for example, we're still looking into the mechanics of how it worked.
Okay, then I guess I'll just make a couple of comments. One is that given that these are all sort of disparate efforts, it seems like when you do your tariff filing, I would imagine that you would file these as separable items. It's just a comment. With regard to the hourly block bidding, I know that these were referred to as cost recovery, but I want to make clear that this is really not cost recovery, it's bid recovery. And then I would note that you said you only want to do it during tight system conditions, and then I just wonder if you why FMM would be lower during tight system conditions than the HASC market. I mean, maybe because you exceptionally dispatch, but then maybe it's not as tight as you think. So that's one comment. The other comment I want to note is
can I, Michelle, just
go ahead. Sure.
So we're on the same page about the scope. I agree that was a bad use of terms. It shouldn't be cost recovery. It should be bid recovery, and there's a very simple explanation of why FMM can be lower than HASC. It's because hourly block imports can clear and even set the price in HASC, but they can't in FMM. So if your marginal resource is an import, it's $500, and then the next dispatchable generator is $300. Well, the import resource is going to clear at $500 in HASC, but then it's not going to set the price. And other imports might have cleared also. It's not going to set the price in FMM. It's going to then the price would be set by the $300 50-minute dispatchable resource. And so, that's the issue we want to explore. This is not a proposal yet. There's real issues with providing this bid cost recovery for imports that we've struggled with before, and so we're looking at those now. And we got that suggestion to look at the bid cost recovery for imports, and we think it's something at least taking another look at. But by no means do we have a proposal for that yet.
Okay. And then my final comment is I guess you're talking about manual dispatch of RDRR, but you also take imports out of market as well, right? I mean, if you're talking about things not clearing the market. Is that right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I think that's all my comments. We'll put our scope issues in our comments as well as these comments as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. We'll go to the next question.
Okay. On to the next question. Caller, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Ian White with Shell. I want to thank the ISO for allowing this or doing this call today, scoping call. It's been helpful. First, some high-level comments. I think we all agree that price formation is a very sensitive topic and very important. And when your prices are skewed for any reason, that doesn't incent new resource development at the right place at the right time. And developers and market participants take their cue from market prices, among other factors, in making resource acquisition decisions. And any actions in markets that skew or affect prices are really important. And an example I would give of that is, I think it would make sense to have a standardized approach to where convergence bidding, et cetera, would be suspended. Because having a herky-jerky approach really doesn't allow forward prices to reflect the types of resources that need to be brought to the grid. I think the other thing, just as a general comment, in tight supply conditions, increasingly economy energy is relied upon for reliability. And economy energy imports at the ties may come from other external resources. And those external entities make decisions about where and why to sell, either to import to CAISO or sell bilaterally at another hub. So I think it would make sense, we would support the idea that if a resource offers energy on an economy basis, a non-RA resource offers economy energy to the ISO and is dispatched in HASP at, say, $500, but then FMM clears $300, it would really make sense for at least that resource to be paid the HASP price. So it is really difficult when you have one price dispatching a resource and the resource being paid either a higher or lower price. It really points to the fact that the HASP being an advisory can be relatively useless because it doesn't reflect actual conditions inside of the FMM hour. The other general comment I have is that RDRR is curtailment of native load, and it's not a market participating resource like a PDR. So I think it makes sense that native load has a very high priority in markets, and such that RDRR, it's appropriate for RDRR to only be exercised near the bid cap to incent and show markets that, look, this is a very tight supply condition and we're taking emergency efforts. And so dispatching it at a resource either out of market or below that really points to that resource being used as a proxy demand resource rather than a reliability or emergency resource. And the one ask I would have to the CAISO, and I'm a little surprised to not see that in this scope, is ancillary service enhancements. So both conditions where there was a declared EEA3 emergency and subsequent native load curtailment, that was ordered because of a deficiency of operating reserves. You had units providing spin, non-spin, regulation up, fully deployed, providing energy to keep supply and demand met. And so if you only approach scarcity from an energy perspective, you're really missing the fact that scarcity conditions and or reliability actions are really taken due to ancillary service needs. And so for instance, you attract economy energy imports to free up reserves to meet your reserve obligation. The point at that moment isn't necessarily energy. The point is that the market has run out of ancillary services. And when ancillary services are not procured on a 5-minute basis, that causes issues, especially when that ancillary service price scarcity doesn't show up in markets. So those are kind of the main points I wanted to make, but I think that we're on the right track in trying to find ways to have prices point to signaling actual scarcity conditions, and we look forward to being part of that process. Thank you.
Yeah, James, this is Brad. I just wanted to respond to a couple of the scope items. I won't start getting into the comments about the design of these various things because we can cover that in our next meeting on this. But thanks for the comments. We'll think about them. But just for the scope items, I'd point out if the reason we have in our tariff authority to suspend convergence bidding for anomalous market outcomes is just because there are things we can't predict are going to happen, such as what happened last summer. And if we were bound by just predefined, A, B, and C, these are the reasons, then we would have left, without that tool last summer. And so I don't believe we're inclined to take up specific criteria for suspending convergence bidding in this initiative. But as far as the ancillary services scarcity pricing, we actually do price in the real-time market, not in the 5-minute market, but in the RTPD based on ancillary services scarcity. It's a less than perfect design because our market does not fully co-optimize ancillary services with energy. It only does it when it's procuring incremental ancillary services. So, you know, as we've said and we've noted in our roadmap, we have a longer-term scarcity pricing initiative planned, and we'll address those kinds of issues. But again, that's not something we can do in 2 months by this summer. That's why we've narrowed the scope to a more targeted ancillary services fix.
And that makes sense. And so, you know, I think where we can agree in terms of what's in scope here is, you know, looking at external resources that are not providing RA, providing energy on an economy basis, and really ensuring that they're paid what they're bid. I would argue all the time, not just during tight scarcity conditions. Considering that, you know, HASP is an advisory price, and oftentimes you'll see wide disparities between the HASP price and the FMM and RTD prices, especially on high-priced or high-load days. Thank you again.
Great, thank
you.
All right, thanks. How many people do we have in the queue, Kay?
We have 5.
Okay, so what I'm going to ask is if you have a question specific to these items that James talked about, what we do want to take questions. If you have specific comments, just general comments, if you could just include those in writing. You know, we are asking for stakeholders to provide written comments. If you can just submit those in writing, that would be helpful, because we do need to still go over the schedule as well as the next steps. So we'll go ahead and go to the next caller, Kay.
Caller, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, this is Stefan Nagy from LEAP. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, hi, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi. So I have a question, and this is kind of following up on one of the comments that an earlier commenter made around PDRs and the fact that you don't have anything in here to address the dispatch of PDRs. So in the August and September heat waves, we personally experienced some what we thought was kind of strange instances where we had bids that were offered at or, you know, below the bid cap that were not getting dispatched economically, even when prices had exceeded, you know, $1,500 per megawatt hour. If you review the report from CAISO on the root cause analysis, the graphs also support, you know, kind of the fact that across the board there were a lot of PDR resources that were not getting dispatched during these emergency conditions, even at stage 2 conditions. So I guess I'd be curious to understand if CAISO knows why that type of occurrence would happen, that resources that had bids either in the day-ahead or real-time market were not getting taken, and that resources that were available were not getting dispatched appropriately. And then I guess the follow-on would be, if you don't have an answer for that, you know, why is that not being included here? Because I think PDRs are clearly a really big and also growing part of the market, you know, growing much more than, you know, rapidly than RDRR is kind of fixed. So I guess I'd be curious to understand why you're solely focused on RDRR and not planning to address any dispatch, you know, failures with PDRs.
Yeah, this is Brad. We can circle back and double check on PDRs and last summer events. We're not prepared on this call to get into specifics of what happened on certain days and certain hours in the summer. That'd be more appropriate for the call that we have on the final root cause analysis, I think. But I would note that, you know, our real-time market is a multi-interval optimization. So there is nothing unusual about a resource not being dispatched in an interval, even though the LMP is above its bid. That happens all the time in the multi-interval optimization.
So I mean, I guess that's the case, but is it normal to enter a stage 2 or even, on Friday of August, the August heat wave, a stage 3 event and not have resources that are available to be dispatched? I guess you don't have to answer the question right here. I would just give the same, urge that one of the previous commenters from Klika gave, that I really think that it's important to place an emphasis on making sure that PDRs are able to get dispatched appropriately in addition to the work that you're going to do in relation to RDRRs.
Okay, thanks.
And so let's go ahead and take one more question, and then we're going to review the schedule because there may be questions on the schedule as well. So,
caller, please go ahead.
Hi, James and Brad. It's Jeff Spires from PowerX here. I'll try to keep this quick. I just entered the queue to try to give a little bit of feedback on this topic 4 on the screen because it was one that we had suggested. So we appreciate you adding this to the list. And I think it is, I understand this has been debated in the past and that there are pros and cons to enabling some kind of bid cost recovery for imports in the HASP. So I just kind of wanted to emphasize that from our perspective, we recognize that, and we were really, I think as James kind of pointed out when he walked through this, we were really thinking that this solution could be targeted to certain conditions when, when supply is tight and the CAISO is really looking to secure supply. I mean, just for a little bit of context, basically the issue that we're raising is during the summer there were periods when during the emergency conditions the CAISO was calling for energy to external entities including PowerX. We delivered energy into the CAISO BA and found that the FMM price at the intertie we were delivering to went negative. So we're basically selling in peak hours at a negative price. And one of the challenges with that is, first of all, it's unexpected outcome, I think, kind of obviously, but also there's our understanding is that there's also the CAISO may have been making out-of-market purchases at the same time from imports, presumably transacting those at different prices based on bid or better or whatever the negotiated price is for those out-of-market purchases. And so, kind of take a step back and look at that and think, well, sending in energy during those periods and ending up getting a negative price for that is not really what we think is the right outcome. It seems to us that in these limited circumstances, and maybe it's defined by when there's a flex alert or something like that, there probably is justification to consider providing more certainty to importers around the price that they're going to receive. And so I just kind of wanted to emphasize that I think what you have proposed here and what we were looking for was more targeted than kind of just generally opening up this discussion around bid cost recovery on the interties, and it was intended to be more targeted. So we do appreciate you giving consideration to this issue.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right, so let's go ahead and go through the schedule, James. And then we can open it up for questions in case anybody has questions on the schedule. So go ahead.
All right. So for the upcoming schedule, obviously today is the stakeholder call. I mentioned already the workshops that are planned on the 12th and the 13th that have specific topics involved there. Comments to this workshop or to this call will be due on the 14th, an extra day planned so that people who attended the workshops can have a little extra time to absorb that into their comments. But we'll also take separate comments on the workshops the following week. We plan to post a straw proposal presentation on Friday the 22nd, and that says that presentation is not a typo. We don't, because of the expedited process, we don't plan on posting a full policy paper on the proposals. It will very likely or almost certainly be in the form of some sort of presentation that each of the policy leads of each subtopic will present the following 26th or 27th. And then, of course, we'll leave a week for comments there. Next slide, please. Then a quick turnaround to the week of February 8th, in which we plan to post the draft final proposal. It says board memo there in parentheses because, again, given the tight timeline, the format of the draft final proposal is likely to be in either in a board memo form or similar to board memo form, just so we can sort of consolidate our deliverables there. We'll also plan to post the draft business requirement specifications and tariff language at that time. Hold a stakeholder call the week after with comments due the week after, and then we're right there preparing for the EIM governing body meeting on March 10th and the ISO Board of Governors meeting in the end of March to prepare for a June 1st implementation. So we, hardly have an hour to let slip in this schedule. And so again, we're asking for, stakeholders to be very focused and engaged, as we don't have a lot of time to make these changes. So thanks, Christina.
Sure. So we will open it up for questions again, but I just wanted to talk about next steps. So we, as James mentioned, we are taking comments on the discussion today. So please use the template that's out on the initiative webpage. Also, we did issue a notice yesterday regarding the 2 workshops that we're hosting next week. So if you are interested in presenting your perspectives on either of those topics, please notify us as soon as you can, at least by end of day on Friday. But if you can notify us earlier, that would be helpful so that we can coordinate with you for those workshops. So let's go ahead and see if there are any questions. Again, press pound 2 to raise your hand.
Caller, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Camille Kristen from Idaho Power. My question was on, I think it's slide 13, regarding topic 7. I just wondered if you could elaborate any more on the second bullet there, system market power mitigation pending final decision. I understood that that was sort of on hold or pending the scarcity pricing initiative, and so I'm just curious if you can say any more about what you're considering implementing under this topic 7.
Yeah, this is Brad Cooper. We've all along said we're continuing to assess how system market power performed last summer. There's been some preliminary indications that showed that we did not turn out to have a problem with system market power being exercised last summer. But there are still some additional analyses that are ongoing, and we're still looking at things. And so if we, based on that stuff, if we see the need for it, then we would potentially move forward to implement the system market power mitigation. But we didn't say we would not necessarily implement system market power mitigation until we had more long-term scarcity pricing changes. We just said that that based on the evidence of system market power being exercised that we have to date, balanced with the value of having improved scarcity pricing measures in place with system market power, that we didn't think it was the best thing to do to move forward with system market power right now. But again, that's still based on continuing to look at things.
Okay, so you're still looking at the additional analysis and I guess TBD, is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Moving on to the next caller, please go ahead.
Hey, this is Mike Castellano from the CPUC. Just have a couple quick points on some of the things that have been said. First, Brad, your reply to Michelle Keto's question about the HASP resources. You said that there was a $300 generator that somehow wasn't cleared in HASP when $500 import bids were being cleared in HASP. So I think you missed something there.
Mike, I didn't mean to say that if I said that. I said, I think my example was a higher import priced higher than a $300 generator that also cleared in HASP, set the price in HASP, and then the generator then set the price in FMM. I didn't say that the generator.
Right, but how does the generator set the price in FMM unless load goes down? Like something else has to be going on there. The price doesn't just automatically move to the generator, I don't think.
Okay, I was just doing a quick, simple example.
Brad,
but the issue is imports are price takers in HASP, and then are not price takers in HASP. They're scheduled in HASP. They're price takers in FMM.
Right, and I understand the issue, but the point Michelle is making is the only reason you would really need this BCR is because something has changed. There was something wrong with HASP, and I think this was part of what Jeff Spires was just saying. It seems that the ISO has taken some kind of out-of-market action that may have lowered prices if we're talking about times of high need. So, there's still a lot of concern about that from our perspective about why that would be necessary. And then just overall, I think some of the approaches about how you guys want to talk about scheduling priorities and load versus native stuff, and in addition, the perceived need to curtail the participation by virtual bids. I think another thing that we have to address during this, and I know you guys have done some stuff on this, but we need to get into it more, is how RUC failed on August 14th, or the August 13th run for RUC. Produced infeasibilities, and those infeasibilities didn't result in any market action to compensate for them, and instead, there were infeasible schedules fed into the real-time market at that time. And I think, acknowledging that and working through how it happened and what can be done to change that is important, because those kind of failures of the RUC process are really concerning. And, all the talk about load being adequately scheduled, it's just a little bit weird because RUC is there to avoid the problem of load not being adequately scheduled, and for various reasons that failed in August. So talking through that and working through that problem, I think, should be an important part of this process. And then the last thing, I've said this before, but scarcity pricing I really don't think has much to do with how resources are planned in California. I think it takes a long time to build and plan something in California, and I don't think high prices next summer are going to do it. I think there's a lot of process. Well, I know there's a lot of process within the state, within the localities, and I really see a lot of this drive for scarcity pricing as being irrelevant to the goal of getting the right resources in the right place, because it's just not how it happens in the state. So I'm very concerned when I hear stuff like that, because it sounds like it's just a price increase to me.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, the goal of that workshop on the scheduling priorities is to finish. We've had the previous workshop, but the goal of this is to finish going through outstanding questions such as you have, and so everyone understands how things work, I guess what went wrong, the way things work now, to get on the same baseline so we can talk about potential changes moving forward from there, and we're all starting from a common understanding.
Okay, so we are out of time. I really appreciate all the questions and comments today. We look forward to seeing those in writing. Again, please submit those by January 14th, and if you are interested in presenting your organization's perspectives during the workshops next week, please let ISO Stakeholder Affairs team know at the email address provided on this slide. So thank you all Hope you have a great afternoon, and thank you, Kay, for your assistance today.
All right. And that concludes our conference. Thank you for using AT&T Event Conferencing Enhanced. You may now disconnect.